The president understands that he has a tremendous amount of political pushback. This pushback comes from people like Marco Rubio, his Secretary of State slash National Security Advisor, who hates Russia and everything about Russians. Just give us the ability to build long-range strike weapons so that once we get this ceasefire and we have a frozen conflict and, we can begin building our factories and we'll produce this. This is just Ukraine's. This is a British-driven plan called Keep Ukraine in the Fight. It's something British MI6 to get conditions for peace. But the Russians aren't under any illusion that Donald Trump is able to conceive and implement policy without pushback. There are tremendous forces arrayed against Donald Trump right now. And half the things he does right now is designed to appease the people who have the knives out because he dared capacity to launch these weapons that in many cases are designed in the West and are produced using tools and other production means that have been brought into Ukraine by the West. Russia is taking them out.
Well, I mean, nothing happens in a vacuum. Russia just doesn't wake up one morning and say arbitrarily, let's do this, that, or the other thing. I think what we're seeing in the targeting that's taking place by Russia is a couple things. One, that Russia is serious about bringing it into this conflict on terms that are acceptable to Russia, meaning that Russia and Russia alone will dictate the outcome of this war. Two, how utterly responsible Russia has been in the prosecution of this conflict. We're seeing two categories of targets being hit of late. And the West is calling this, the escalation. One is Russia's hitting defense industry facilities. And you have to ask yourself, well, why now? I mean, why haven't they been striking them before? See, Russia's goal and objective is not to terminate Ukraine's ability to function as a modern industrial state. And so Russia strikes defense industry facilities that produce capabilities that threaten Russia. And what we've seen lately is that the West has been shifting ballistic missile technology, drone technology from, Western sources, the case of Turkish sources to Ukrainian soil. And, we've been on the cusp of, preparing actual weapons that could be fired against Russia. And Russia has identified these locations and taken them out. And they've done so in a very aggressive fashion. It's Russia's goal and objective to ensure that Ukraine doesn't have the capacity to launch these weapons that in many cases are designed in the West and are produced using tools and other production means that have been, brought into Ukraine by the West. Russia's taking them out. And the other thing is Russia now has decided they are going to be more aggressive in targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure in response to Ukraine's I can't say, I was going to say irresponsible, but hey, it's war. Ukraine has been targeting Russia's oil refining capability. Clearly, the British have played a very big role in tracking this, and the Ukrainians have been fairly effective in hitting. Russia has just said enough is enough, and now Russia is going to come back in a disproportionate response, meaning that Ukraine will now be crippled energy-wise. This was Ukraine's choice. Ukraine opted to escalate to this level, and now Ukraine will pay the price. But this is what we're seeing here, together with, Russia's ongoing targeting of Western munitions. They make their way into Ukraine aircraft, anti-air capabilities, etc. But we are seeing an escalation in the air campaign. Then on the ground, it's just, again, Russian dominance all over I think the other guys can talk to that just as well as I can. Well, where we are is Russia's continuing to do what they do, which is to eradicate the enemy. I think part of their denazification plan is the long-term destruction of the military capabilities of Ukraine, both personnel and war. Material, I've said for a long time. What Russia turned Ukraine into is a NATO garbage compactor. You throw war material in there, you throw tanks and M7S and all the wonder weapons. You throw Ukrainian personnel and/or mercenaries in there, and Russia will destroy them. And when the trash compactor is empty, fill it again, and Russia will destroy it again. I think that's what Russia is doing. I think Russia recognizes that there's even a NATO plan for the conclusion of the so-called conclusion of the conflict, at which time whatever's left of Ukrainians' resources, male and or female resources, they'll try to use them for some kind of a dirty war. And I think Russia's plan is to eliminate all of those resources as necessary and to completely break the back of Ukraine so that at the conclusion of this, the people that are left in Ukraine have no will to fight and they just want this thing over and to be, to get back to some kind of life. So I don't think Russia has a time limit on this. I don't think they're, ramping up or ramping down. They have targets. They're striking the targets and they will continue. As the NATO trash compactor fills, they'll continue to empty it until there's nothing left for NATO to put in the trash compactor. I'm very disappointed in him. He and I always had a great relationship. I'm very disappointed. Thousands of people are dying. They're not Americans that are dying, but they're Russians and they're Ukrainians. And there's thousands. And it's a war that makes no sense, and it would have never started if I were president. And that's what bothers me even more, because the election was totally rigged, and it's a shame. We'll see what happens. But I'm very disappointed in President Putin, I can say that. And we'll be doing something to help people live. It's not question of Ukraine. It's help people live. Well, first of all, let's just make it very clear. This is fantasy. The reality is that Russia will not accept conflict termination terms that don't involve demilitarization. And demilitarization means just that. It's the significant reduction in the size of Ukraine's NATO-trained and equipped army to take NATO out of it. And there will be no defense, there will be no meaningful defense industry left. It won't be allowed to exist. This is why Russia has said there won't be a ceasefire, that the conflict ends when the conflict ends on terms that address the root causes of this war. And, the West doesn't seem to want to accept that reality. So Russia just continues on its path. We saw, Ursula von der Leyen speak the other day about Ukraine becoming the military forge of Europe. And she spoke about Ukraine's military being actually the first European army, meaning that we train these people, we equip these people, this is our army, and we have to use it wisely. And together with that, what Ukraine is saying is they recognize the political reality that no matter how much tough talk there is in Europe about deploying troops to Ukraine, there won't be European troops and organized military formations on Ukrainian soil for a number of reasons. First, of course, again, Russia won't allow it, but the other one is that they just can't deploy them. So what Ukraine is saying is, rather than give up on us, just give us the ability to build long-range strike weapons so that once we get this ceasefire and we have a frozen conflict and, we can begin building our factories and we'll produce this. This is just this is a British-driven plan called Keep Ukraine in the Fight. It's something British MI6 together with the Foreign Office have been pursuing since 2023, the disastrous Ukrainian summer counteroffensive. The goal is to make sure that the West doesn't abandon Ukraine. And so what you need to do is create the perception that Ukraine is staying in the fight. And by talking about building these, the ability to have their own missile production, everything. Remember, they're not talking about having it now. They can't. Russia's blowing them all up. They're talking about having it once the war stops. That's how it becomes part of their security guarantees. Well, as I just said, they try and put these things in place right now. They get blown up. Russia's not going to allow any of this stuff to exist on Ukrainian soil. None of it. Zero. And when the war ends, it'll end when Russia says the war is over. So this is just European fantasy, Ukrainian fantasy. And tragically, what it does is it keeps this war going longer than it should be. 1.7 million dead or missing. That's a real number, not a fake number. If you look at it closely, 625,000 as of July of this year, dead, missing. I'm just a simple Marine. I don't claim to be the greatest mathematician, but gosh, that comes up to around 90,000 a month. And things are just getting worse for the Ukrainians. So we're going to be talking about 110,000 a month by year's end. All right, that's dead, or missing, meaning you're never going to find them again. This war cannot be won, cannot be sustained. That's, I guess, the only good news with these casualties is there's no way in hell that Ukraine will be able to continue this fight for much longer. But the bad news is the West just seems to be more than happy to let these Ukrainians die. Again, these aren't trivial numbers. 90,000 right now a month. 90,000. And if this war continues, 110,000. And if you think the Russians are taking similar casualties, you're smoking some strong stuff, man. Because the Russian casualties are dropping as low as they go. I mean, Russia is again, this is a high-intensity conflict. I mean, Russia's losing 176, 200, 215 dead, a week, maybe. I mean, this is war. This ain't a joke. This is war. But the casualties Russia is suffering while high are easily replaceable. Russia is not only replacing them, but is putting in reserves that will come into play when Russia wants them to come into play. This war is so lopsided, it's not even funny right now. The Ukrainians don't get to rotate their troops in what a troop rotation is, from Ukraine being pulled out of a quiet zone of the war, being sent into the heavy part. That's your rotation, no rest. And as you're moving, you're getting hit. You get hit before you go in. Then once you get in, you got to retreat. You die. So they're just moving and dying. You know what Russians do? They go in, they fight for a couple of days, then they get pulled out, rest, refit, while other guys come in. Fresh troops, highly trained, well-equipped, motivated, boom. And the Russians just keep rotating them in and out. The Russians are fresh. The Ukrainians are exhausted. This war is over. So they're talking about, massively rearming Ukraine. What do you mean by Ukraine? What are you, if they could, which they couldn't? Who would man these weapons that they're bringing in? Ghosts? Because that's the only thing that's going to be left of the Ukrainian military. Let's not forget, a year or so ago, the Germans said they're going to rearm and they're going to come up with $800 million Vanderland. Remember this, $800 billion. All of these kind of numbers we were hearing a year ago from Germany and from the EU and et cetera, and now a year later, they don't have a dime. The average German can barely afford a beer and a Schneidel. The French and the Brits are on the verge of a absolute cataclysmic economic collapse. So the idea that countries that are flat broke are going to somehow rearm Ukraine and they're going to send in a bunch of arms that will have to be manned by dead soldiers because they're all getting wiped out doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That I guess I'm going to come up with a fleet of Rolls Royces also. That's it. I'll come up with a fleet of Rolls Royces and they'll come up with a total, rearmament plan for Ukraine and add this. What are the issues that they have? Number one, Ukraine's running out of people. Ukraine's been saying for a while, we're short of people. Number two, the military-industrial complex in the West is unable to produce weapons. So an industrial complex that can't produce weapons is going to produce them somehow magically and send them to a military that's out of people. And oh, by the way, the people that are producing these weapons are broke and have no energy to run their factories. The whole thing is a twisted, sick fantasy that you have to be absolutely ignorant of everything that's going on to read an article like that and think that there's any truth to it and that it's anything other than neocon propaganda. The logistics of doing India, it's different than America, but the logistics, it's sophisticated. It's not pretty, but it works. They have industries, they produce things. They're integrated in ways that Lutnick doesn't even begin to comprehend. The fact that India, I'd like to attend a conference and talk to people about this, because I always laugh at, energy security specialists who are the experts in everything, and I read their stuff and they're like, this is happening, this. Well, how many of them predicted India going from, 3% Russian oil consumption, 42%? I'm going through the reports trying to find the people that predicted that one. They didn't, because they don't understand the dynamic, the reality. They take these Western modes of thinking, and they try to apply it onto things they don't understand. And then they sit there and scratch their head going, how did that happen? How does that work? The Shadow Fleet. We're going to shut down the Russian Shadow Fleet. Well, no, you didn't. Not even close. Because you don't understand the Russian Shadow Fleet. You don't understand the Russian economy. You don't understand the world economy. You don't understand anything. And this is Lutnick. He thinks that by targeting certain sectors of the Indian economy that we're going to break India. He doesn't understand that India is working with Russia, China, Brazil, the global South to create an alternative economic reality that's not dependent upon the United States. And the only one to blame for that is the United States. The arrogance of these economic advisors to Trump. I don't know a damn thing about tariffs. I'm not going to pretend I do. But I can just tell you that, it appears that the money that Trump's making off tariffs isn't coming from foreign governments writing them big checks. It's coming from the American consumer who's paying the higher prices. We were just out shopping you Monday, so that would be 2 days ago, trying to buy, gifts. My daughter's getting married and there's a bridal shower coming up. And so, you got to have a little gift bag that you hand out. It's an American thing. So we went to this nice little Asian store in the mall. We've been going there for years. And I was just talking to the owner about prices. He was like, because of the sanctions, they acquire this stuff from China, from Turkey, from India. And he said the prices, we just had to jack them up. It's crazy. Well, he said the prices have increased. And I said, so are you transferring that to the customer? And he said, not necessarily. He said there, I mean, he said, we know how to make money. We've been doing this for a long time, and so we will stay in business. But not every business can do that. Not every business has the latitude to absorb the costs without, going bankrupt. And then in order to stay in business, they will have to transfer the cost to the consumer. And that's what's happening here. I mean, here his company's eating the cost, and so they're paying it in. But it's not as though the Indians are writing the check on his behalf or the Chinese are writing the check on his behalf. No, the American consumer, the American businessman is writing this check, and it's just fake. Everything about what Trump is doing is fake. It's a lie, and we're falling for it. Yeah, I'm not saying that the alternative is better. I'm not saying that Joe Biden wasn't lying. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris wasn't lying. It was a different kind of lie, a different level of sophistication. It was a more sophisticated lie. It wasn't a lie. It was a lie that had been sugar-coated to the American people for so long, we stopped thinking it was a lie. Donald Trump's come in has given us a whole new lie that's supposed to be something different. But at the end of the day, it's just a lie. It's all a lie. It's all about corrupt people trying to make money off of the average American citizen. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's corruption. Just different kind of people making money off of the sweat and labor of the average American. Yeah, well, my job is just to go and nod my head and agree with everything and not get in the way and then buy it when the time comes to buy it. Yeah, I thought early on that I, would have artistic license to make my opinion known. But no, my job isn't to make my opinion known. My job is to yield to the inherent genius of those planning this, and they're right. The fewer moving parts, the better. Too many chefs spoil the stew, but it's fun to be as an observer on this. It's sort of fun to just watch it all happen because it's such a big act of theater. Everything about is theatrical. At the end of the day, this could be done with $10 and a justice of the peace. Just go there, say you're married, sign the damn document, take the envelope of cash, and go on a honeymoon. But nope, we got to take that envelope of cash and give it to everybody to create a grand act of theater. He totally trumped up, bald-faced lie about the Persians. They had greater strategic ambitions, and they didn't care if they sucked the United States into a 20 or 30-year war. Those days are over. President Trump has asserted himself that, hey, you are a protected, what did I just say? He's given orders, right? He's given orders the way it should be. If they want to go do it on their own, hey, God bless you, go for it. But do not suck us in. We're not in for this. It's outrageous what has happened over the last couple years. And we still don't have an investigation on October 7th. And believe me, if the hands were clean of Netanyahu, you would have had an investigation and been out in 30 days. Write that down with your number 2 principle, because that's going to come and you're going to be shocked by it. There's no way that just kind of happened. Look at the Iranian president himself has said that he believes that Israel is going to strike again, and that Iran is prepared for this. I don't share that conclusion, if for no other reason is like you have to ask yourself, remind yourself that Israel is the one that picked up the phone and begged Donald Trump for this ceasefire at the end 12-day war. Now, Iran was glad enough to have it because, they were subjected to a Pearl Harbor type event that took out their senior military leadership. And, the Israelis pulled all the tricks out of the bag with these secret drone fleets and, coming through Azerbaijani airspace to attack the undefended rear of Thrawn. And, Parton and all that defense industry that exists there to the guess the southeast of Thrawn. All of this was hit by the Israelis to great effect. I mean, Iran got hit hard. There's no doubt about it. But Iran recovered, and by the end of the war, the Israeli aircraft, the Iranians have published some interesting interviews with their pilots. Wait a minute. Iran still has pilots? I thought the Israelis took out the entire Iranian Air Force, because where was the Iranian Air Force during this 12-day war doing their job? Apparently, the Iranian Air Force, including those old F-14 seconds and some old F-4S, were locking in on the Israeli aircraft as they were doing their attack run, because the Israelis were using primarily these Blue Streak, air-launched missiles. But to do that, you've got to basically fly an attack route. And as they were doing that before weapons release, the Iranian Air Force would lock on, causing the Israelis to break the attack. Now, they weren't getting shot down, but they weren't able to complete their mission, and the Iranians were disrupting the Israeli attacks. It wasn't as one-sided as everybody makes it out to be. And what we do know, too, is that the Iranians had overcome the Israeli ballistic missile defense shield. By the end of the war, the Iranians were hitting targets. They were causing Israel great pain. The Israelis are starting to come out and sort of admit that there were more targets hit than they're admitting, and it did cause them a lot of concern. And the senior leadership was telling Netanyahu, if we continue, they're really going to mess us up. Really going to mess us up. We have to stop this war now. We have lost control of the outcome. So now we come to the present. What has changed as Israel's ballistic missile defense shield shades? One of the things that there's a very interesting book written by a British technical intelligence guy about World War II, and I just had the name of the book on the tip of my tongue, War in Secret, A Secret War, or something of that nature. But it's about the technical intelligence. But basically, each side investigates the capabilities, the other reverses, engineers things, and then comes up. That's how we got radar, German radar, British radar. That's how things happen. And I was introduced to this book by Israeli technical intelligence officers who were working during the Gulf War. And basically, the Iraqis were firing in their Al-Hussein missiles. And then later on, they threw in the short Al-Hussein, which is a different variation in the Alaj, how Al-Hajara, and each